Before you listen, if you enjoy the stories and want to hear more, please consider subscribing to the channel. Most of you listening are not currently subscribed, so take this opportunity to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications to never miss a story. Thank you. As a father, I know firsthand that we will do anything for our children, especially our daughters. My daughter recently reached the age where she's learning to ride a bike and has graduated from training wheels. Due to her rapid growth, she needed a new bicycle. Together, we searched the internet for options, and as expected, she was drawn to the more expensive models. Unfortunately, we couldn't afford a new one, so I took it upon myself to find a used bike that was still in good condition. After searching on Craigslist, I found one that seemed almost too good to be true for a reasonable price. My wife and I went to check it out, and to my surprise, it was in excellent condition, almost like new. Although I had some doubts, I decided to take a chance and purchased it from the seller, who claimed that his daughter had barely used it. We hid the bike in our shed until our daughter's birthday, and when we finally gave it to her, she was thrilled. She rode it all day at her party, and I was relieved that my job as a father was done for the time being, knowing that the bike would last her a few years at least. Over the next few weeks, life went on as usual. My daughter, whom we'll call Alex, rode her new bike with her friends after school and on weekends. Other than adjusting the seat, I had little work to do on it. However, I should have anticipated that something would go wrong. One Sunday afternoon, Alex was riding in the street with her cousin in front of our house when suddenly, I heard screaming and crying outside. I rushed out to see what was going on, and to my horror, saw Alex sitting in the street, holding her leg. As I approached her, I noticed blood pouring out of it. I admit, I got a bit nervous. I asked her what happened, and she was crying so hard that I had to calm her down before I could get a straight answer. Fortunately, her cousin was there and explained that the pedal had broken off and cut her leg. When I turned around, I saw the pedal on the ground and noticed that the part connecting it to the crank arm had sheared off, leaving sharp little points. The other half was still in the crank, also leaving sharp points. I started to get angry when I realized that the post steel looked like cheap pot metal. To give you an idea, imagine a stick broken in half, with two sharp points located at the break. I sent the cousin inside to tell my wife what had happened, while I rushed Alex to the ER. I wasn't sure how to apply first aid, so I left it alone. After arriving at the hospital, Alex was treated for her wound and given painkillers. Her leg was cleaned and sewn up, and we arranged for a cosmetic surgeon to make it look better. Throughout this ordeal, I couldn't help but feel angry about the shoddy quality of the bike's pedal. When we got home, I spent hours searching the internet for information about the bike. To my dismay, I discovered that this particular bike had a known issue with its pedals, and there was even a recall to replace them. However, the recall had been issued 2 years before I purchased the bike, so I had no one to blame but myself for not doing more research. I apologized to my wife and daughter for my negligence and failure as a father. As I was making amends, I couldn't shake the thought that the seller might have been aware of the problem and intentionally withheld it from me. The idea consumed me until I finally called and asked. I was cautious in my approach, leaving out any mention of Alex's injury. The seller claimed that it had slipped his mind and advised me to contact the company for a free pair of pedals. I lost my temper when he suggested it was a simple process and asked why he didn't do it himself before selling the bike. I accused him of being lazy and possibly even selling the bike with full knowledge of the potential danger it posed. He was caught off guard and couldn't come up with an appropriate response. By that point, I was absolutely livid. I was convinced that he had knowingly sold me a dangerous bike, despite being aware of the recall. He had practically admitted to it. That's when I decided I was going to sue him. "Well, I'll see you in court, you **** hole," I shouted before slamming the phone down. It was a satisfying moment, but I should have consulted our lawyer before making such a threat. After we spoke with our lawyer, it was clear that we had a strong case. At first, I wanted to go after him for everything he was worth. After all, he was a doctor. But once I cooled down, all I really wanted was for him to pay Alex's medical bills and apologize. Our lawyers exchanged a few phone calls back and forth, and we eventually reached a settlement. He agreed to pay Alex's bills and meet us in person to apologize. A few days later, we met him for lunch, and he offered a sincere apology to both me and Alex. I was surprised when he even apologized to Alex, but she accepted it gracefully. It was then that I realized that I had become so obsessed with seeking revenge that I had forgotten about what was truly important, my daughter's safety. There was no way I was going to let her ride that death trap of a bike again, so I took a chunk of our tax return and bought her a brand new one. In hindsight, that's what I should have done in the first place. After work each night for a week, I researched the pros and cons of different bikes until I found the best one. It cost more than I had hoped, but when it comes to our children's safety, we can't put a price on it. About 2.5 years ago, I met a woman at a bar. She had been stood up, and I had just finished work and decided to have a couple of pints to relax. I wasn't looking to pick up anyone, but after about 45 minutes, the bartender passed me a note from a woman at the end of the bar who asked if I'd join her at her table for a chat. I looked over and saw the most stunning woman I had ever laid eyes on, and I was certain the note was meant for someone else. However, to my surprise, she nodded when I asked if the note was intended for me. And that's how our evening began. We introduced ourselves, and I found out her name was Amber, and she was 25 years old. As we talked, I asked her why she had written me the note, and she explained that she was genuinely interested in getting to know me. Although I was flattered, I couldn't help but wonder if it was some sort of prank, but Amber assured me it wasn't. We spent another hour getting to know each other, and when she asked if I wanted to take her home, I didn't hesitate. We walked a few blocks to my apartment. After a few more drinks, we started fooling around. I don't like to divulge details, but let's just say we enjoyed each other's company for the remainder of the night. When I woke up the next morning, she was already gone. At first, I thought it was just a fantastic dream, and went back to sleep. However, when I noticed a pair of beer bottles, one with lipstick residue on the mouth, I realized it wasn't just a dream. I even sniffed the pillow opposite mine and was hit with the wonderful scent of her perfume. I was ecstatic and couldn't stop thinking about her. I tried to find her by asking some of the bar's employees, but no one knew how to contact her. I eventually moved on and started dating someone else, but Amber was always on my mind. Unfortunately, that relationship didn't work out, and I found myself single again. I returned to the bar and tried asking around once more, but with no luck. I couldn't afford to hire a detective, and without her last name, I couldn't find her on the internet. However, one day while browsing Craigslist, I stumbled upon the missed connections section and decided to post a brief description of our night together, hoping to reconnect. Days went by without any responses until the 8th day. Someone claiming to be Amber messaged me and was able to answer all my questions and provide details that no one else could have known. I was thrilled to be in contact with her again and asked if we could meet for drinks. She suggested the place where we first met, and I felt like this could be the start of something special. I spent the whole week leading up to the date with a knot in my stomach, counting down the hours until Saturday arrived. When I met her, she looked even more beautiful than I remembered. We had a lovely evening together, but I couldn't help noticing that she kept checking her phone. I assumed it was just nerves and tried not to let it bother me. After a few hours, she suggested we go back to her place, which I had been looking forward to for months. While she was in the bathroom, I noticed she was on the phone again. I didn't think much of it, assuming she was maybe talking to a roommate or something. I didn't really know much about her personal life. When we got to her car, I stumbled into the passenger seat, and she just sat there smiling at me, not starting the car. I thought maybe she wanted to make out, but when I leaned in for a kiss, a strange male voice told me to stop. I was so drunk that I had a hard time figuring out what was happening. I looked back and saw a large masked man in the back seat, pointing a gun at me. "Don't make me shoot you, cowboy," he said. Instantly, I sobered up. I could tell he meant every word. I looked over to Amber, and our eyes met. I knew then that I had been tricked. Her eyes were cold, lacking any empathy. I was devastated. In that moment, I lost my desire to live. Moving much faster than I should have, I yanked my wallet from my pocket and threw it into the back seat. My nonchalance caught the man off guard. He said nothing, even as I stepped from the car and slammed the door. I didn't know what to do, so I just stood mute, staring at the pavement. It remained quiet for around 30 seconds until I heard the car start and speed away. It wasn't long before I had a massive adrenaline dump. The seriousness of what had occurred mere moments prior hit me like a truck. I hunched over and actually began vomiting. Massive amounts of booze and nachos poured from my guts. I eventually ran dry and returned to my feet. I wiped my mouth and made my way home. I wanted nothing but to sleep, and didn't even bother to undress before falling into bed. Most of the day was gone when I woke up. I chugged a bottle of Gatorade, my hangover cure. The events of the previous night became clear by the second. I felt so stupid. All the time I'd wasted looking for her. Then I got angry, and my desire for revenge kicked in. A quick shower and a 2-mile walk later, I found myself filing a report in Chicago. Stick-ups generally don't get much attention, but when the detective handed me some mug shots, I got the idea I'd stumbled into something a tad more serious. I was shocked to see the faces of Amber and her accomplice staring back at me. As I stared at the mug shots, shock washed over me as I recognized the faces of Amber and her partner. I quickly pointed them out to the detective, who then gave me the full story. I had fallen victim to a scam. Amber's real name was Shannon, and she had been a career con artist. For the last 6 months, she and her partner had been targeting single men, with me being their 5th victim. The previous 3 had been killed. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks, and I shuddered at the thought of what could have happened to me. The detective was unsure why I had been allowed to live, and we both speculated as to why. Perhaps my history made me too much of a risk, or maybe Shannon had been pressured by her partner. The detective hoped I had new information to provide, but unfortunately, I didn't. We spoke a little longer, and he sent me home feeling confused and grateful to be alive. As time passed, things didn't get any clearer. Shannon's partner was arrested on unrelated charges, but he refused to answer any questions. The detective believed that Shannon would not be caught anytime soon, and even if she was, she would remain silent. If and when she is caught, I hope to have a chance to speak with her. I don't wish her any harm, but I want to understand why I was spared when others weren't. Perhaps we had made some emotional connection, but deep down, I know it was probably just luck. In the end, I am just grateful to be alive, and to have a chance to make the most of my life. For a while now, my roommate and I have been having issues, and it was clear to me that she would move out soon. She had a terrifying temper, and on top of that, she was extremely untidy. She would leave a mess around the house and refuse to clean up after herself. Dirty dishes were scattered everywhere, and she would leave her wet towels and worn clothes on the bathroom floor. Although I never had the courage to tell her how I felt, I knew I would have to stand up for myself sooner or later. One night, after returning from work around 1 or 2 in the morning, I tried to be as quiet as possible to avoid disturbing my roommate's sleep since she had to be up by 6 a.m. Before heading to bed, I went to the bathroom to take care of some business. However, as I entered, I slipped on one of the wet towels she had left on the floor, falling hard and hitting the side of my face and shoulder against the bathroom wall. In shock, I rubbed my face when suddenly I heard her bedroom door open. I thought she was coming over to check the commotion or to see if I was all right. Instead, she walked over to me at a fast pace, seething with anger to the point where she was shaking. Still rubbing my face, and now in tears from the pain, I stood up as she scolded me for making too much noise. I explained that it was an accident and that I had slipped on one of the towels she had left on the bathroom floor. At that moment, I decided that I had had enough of her inconsiderate behavior. I called her out on her nonsense and threatened to kick her out. She refused to clean up after herself, and my comments seemed to trigger her. She got in my face and even threatened to kill me. Luckily, I was standing in the bathroom doorway and was able to escape to my bedroom. She didn't follow me and instead stormed back to her room, slamming the door shut. About an hour later, I texted her, informing her that she had to vacate the premises later that day. Surprisingly, she agreed to leave as long as I returned half of that month's rent. I felt relieved that I got off easier than I had imagined. The next day, I woke up at noon and took a walk around the apartment. I was shocked to find that my roommate had taken all her belongings with her. While I was slightly concerned that she hadn't left the keys behind, it was a small price to pay to have her out of my life for good. However, things took a darker turn from there. I spent the whole day cleaning up her mess and packing her things in a box in case she decided to come back for them. At around midnight, I settled into bed, but after about 2 hours of sleep, I was abruptly awakened by a chilling breeze. The blanket felt heavy, and I couldn't pull it off. Annoyed, I rubbed the sleep out of my eyes and went to investigate. To my horror, there was a person's silhouette standing by my bedside. I let out a loud scream and jolted back, pressing my body into the backboard. The silhouette didn't move, just stood in the same spot, breathing slowly. The room was almost completely dark, and I could barely make out any of its features. For some reason, I called out my former roommate's name, but the room remained eerily quiet. After about 10 seconds, I heard the sound of an object hitting the floor. The intruder turned and walked towards the bedroom door before leaving the room. I felt a slight rush of adrenaline and quickly locked the door before calling the police. After searching my apartment, the police found no one and no evidence of a break-in. Nothing was stolen or misplaced. My mother arrived, and I told the 2 responding officers that I was confident my former roommate had broken in. They told me there was nothing they could do without proof. Frustrated, I walked back to my room with my mom as the officers left. As I was packing my bags, I kicked something and remembered it must have been the object the intruder had dropped. I was too afraid to look, but my mom retrieved it from under the bed. To my dismay, she retrieved a butcher's knife. After moving to a new city, I turned to Craigslist to find a roommate. I found a post by a guy named James, and we exchanged a few emails and phone calls. When we met in person, James seemed like a friendly and easygoing guy. However, during our conversation, he revealed that he had a severe sleepwalking condition that could make some people uncomfortable. I didn't think it was a big deal, and we became roommates. At first, everything seemed fine, and James was a great roommate. But then I started noticing strange things happening around the apartment. Food would go missing from the fridge and things would be moved around. I assumed it was just James sleepwalking and didn't pay much attention to it. One night, I was awakened by a strange noise coming from James's room. It was a low growling sound that gave me chills. When I peeked into his room, I saw James standing in the middle of the room with his eyes closed. It was a strange and unsettling sight, so I quietly backed away and went back to my own room. The strange sounds continued for a few more minutes before stopping. In the morning, I didn't mention anything to James to avoid embarrassing him. He seemed normal anyway, so I ignored it and tried to forget about it. However, over the next few days, I started waking up to footsteps in the hallway, doors opening and closing, and even James making the same growling noise. Although I knew it was just James sleepwalking, it still made it hard for me to fall asleep unless I heard him go back to bed. One night, I was awoken by the sound of James's bedroom door slamming shut. Normally, he closed it softly, so it caught my attention. His footsteps slowly crept over to my room, and I saw his shadow under the door crack. Then, the doorknob slowly turned, and he opened the door quietly. James stood in the darkness between the doorway, and I froze. It was a creepy sight, even though I knew he was sleepwalking. Suddenly, he started making the same growling noises again, and after a moment, he lunged towards me. I tried to break free, but he was too strong. I felt a deep, intense fear building inside me. He spoke in a monotone voice, telling me to stay still and not move. Then, just like that, it was over. James released me and slumped off the bed. He walked back to his room and closed the door softly behind him. I quickly got out of bed and locked my bedroom door, staying up for the rest of the night. In the morning, I left for work early before James even woke up. I dreaded the thought of seeing him at home after work because I knew it would be awkward. However, when I pulled into the driveway after work, his car wasn't there. I noticed that many things were missing from the house, and when I checked his room, it had been emptied. I tried calling James over the next few days, but never received a response. I never heard from him again. I have no idea why he left. Perhaps he somehow knew what he did and felt ashamed. However, if he was truly sleepwalking, then he wouldn't have had any memory of it. The whole experience still freaks me out, and my mind associates it with Craigslist. As a result, I stopped using the site. I just hope that James was really sleepwalking, because I worry that if he wasn't, he might come back. Thank you for watching today's video. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and sharing it to support me. The best is yet to come.